All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the African Health Agenda International Conference for 2021. This session, as hosted by the IFPMA, is on the topic, why an African Medicines Agency and why now? To give a brief overview to this session brings patients, industry, product development partnerships, and other public and private health stakeholders around the table to explain why AMA is key to optimizing sustainability in the supply of medicinal health products for diseases disproportionately affecting Africa. As a background to this, 2 years ago, after the treaty agreed to establish an African Medicines Agency, over 50 leading organizations called heads of states and governments to ratify the treaty as a matter of priority. Although there has been political support, legal commitment from more countries remain to be secured for the continent-wide regulatory agency to become a reality. The treaty has so far been signed by 19 countries, but only 8 out of the necessary 15 have ratified it. Following the multi-stakeholder call to AU heads of state to ratify the AMA Treaty, the panel will seek to bring its content to the attention of African health organizations having a stake in its implementation and explain its importance in the journey towards universal health coverage. This afternoon, I'll be engaging a number of key experts and panelists to discuss broadly the issue around why AMA must happen and must happen now. I am Philip Selassie Tagboto, and I'll be moderating the session today. To give a brief introduction about myself, I'm currently the chairman of AREPI, the Industry Association of Ethical Pharmaceutical Company Industries in Ghana. I've been working in this position with other stakeholders to shape policies that impact on access to medicines broadly in Ghana. In addition to this, I've also worked together with the FDA to launch a marketing code to regulate ethical standards in marketing of pharmaceutical products in Ghana. I have close to 15 years of pharma industry experience at different levels of increasing leadership responsibility. And I currently work with Novartis as head of English West Africa business operations and country head for Novartis operations in Ghana. In this afternoon session, I'll be taking perspectives of key experts on what their thoughts are regarding AMA Treaty ratification and the setup of an African regulatory body. Just a brief information before I engage the panelists for this afternoon session. Please kindly put your questions within the chat, and at the end of the panel discussion, I will be kind enough to take your questions and get our panelists to address them. So to kickstart the discussions for today, I'm going to call upon our first speaker, who is in the person of Mary Amponsa. Mary Amponsa is the president and CEO of the Global Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organizations. Mary, this afternoon, I would be very glad if you can share with us your perspective, or the perspective of the patient, on how AMA can help deliver timely access of quality, safe, and effective medicinal products to patients on the continent, and how patients expect to engage with the future agency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. And I am Mary Ekwe-Ampoma. It's Ampoma, not Amponsa. Good afternoon, everybody from Ghana. On behalf of the Global Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organization, the Board of Directors, and the sickle cell community, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this program, this impactful program, which is IAPO and the Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association. Thank you so much for this impactful program. I'm so excited to be here. Now, Global Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organization, which is GASTO, was formed to have a unified voice for the sickle cell community. And we are made up of so many national and regional sickle cell support groups and other stakeholders like pharmaceutical companies, volunteers, and other people who are interested in sickle cell. So we are global. We are very global. But then one of the core objectives of GASTO is to inspire hope and to ensure that no matter where any sickle cell patient is living, they have quality care in terms of comprehensive care. So GASTO wants to eliminate issues related to geographical health inequality, stigmatization, and treatment barriers. But then we have challenges, and we have challenges because of accessibility and availability of drugs when it comes to making sure that no matter where anybody is, they have comprehensive care. So in terms of availability of drugs, when we look at it globally, yes, developed countries have access, but when it comes to low and middle income countries, like countries in Africa, we don't really have access. If you look at Ghana, I remember that I work in one of the largest adult sickle cell clinic in Ghana. And before 2019, November, most patients who usually get crisis have not have access to disease-modifying drugs like hydroxyurea, which has been in existence for about 30 decades, three decades now. They haven't had access to it. So they still go through frequent crisis, which is impacting on their quality of life. So Novartis came in 2019 and made it accessible. They roll out free hydroxyurea in most of the treatment centers in Ghana. Now, the question is, when it comes to AMA, we think that AMA will be helpful here because we know that when drugs are locally manufactured, right? When drugs are locally manufactured, they become cheaper. So AMA, I know that AMA is a regulatory agency and is going to harmonize all regulatory agencies in Africa to ensure that drugs are locally manufactured, so that disease-modifying drugs like hydroxyurea will be locally manufactured to improve accessibility and affordability among patients. And secondly, I think that when it comes to manufacturing, AMA is going to make sure that drugs that are made accessible, especially existing disease-modifying drugs, will be safe and of high quality. So AMA comes in handy to the sickle cell community. Then also when it comes to biosimilars of drugs, AMA is going to make sure that yes, these drugs that are being manufactured, these innovative disease-modifying drugs that are being manufactured, yes, they will when they are manufactured, yes, they will ensure that they will be approved immediately and quickly in all countries, so that they will be manufactured quickly for accessibility and availability. Then also, I think that when it comes to antibiotics, AMA is going to prevent another second pandemic, in that all these antibiotics running in our in our market, they will ensure that the regulations are adhered to and fake drugs are being taken away, especially with this antibiotics, so that patients will get access to quality and safe drugs. Then one recommendation that I know that AMA is going to take seriously is to actively involve and engage patient groups. Patient and caregivers in the sickle cell community should be engaged when it comes to decisions concerning drugs. And this will really impact the free movement and accessibility and availability of drugs in our communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mary Ampoma, for sharing. I'm so grateful that you touch on certain key areas that AMA will impact when it is implemented fully. Just to continue, we'll take perspective of the patient, of the student pharmacist or the student in training. I'll be calling on Ni Ofulianan, Chairperson, African Regional Office, International Pharmaceutical Students Federation. Ni Ofulianan will be sharing with us perspectives of why AMA will help build back better during and post-COVID-19, and how will it contribute to pandemic preparedness for future generations in Africa.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you, Philip, for the opportunity. And I'd also like to thank the Executive Committee of IPSF and also my colleague students that helped me in preparing for this session. A special thanks to also Mr. Bakanin Tube, one of our members that is working on regulatory frameworks for his MSc, and he's actually writing a really superb paper on why AMA is so important, the challenges that we faced in establishing it, and then going forward, how we can probably fix those challenges. So I'd like to begin by stating that the establishment of the AMA is very important as students and youth in healthcare, especially pharmacists and young graduates and pharmacy students. The standardized frameworks that would have been existing across the continent as a result of the AMA being established would have improved our continent's emergency response to the global pandemic through activities such as research, of course, in our classrooms, R&D in the pharma industries, and also equitable access of safe and effective vaccines across Africa in such, an example is COVID-19 and the Ebola outbreaks that our continent faced. In turn, the drastic effects that COVID-19 has had on education, especially pharmacy education this past year, would have been minimal or non-existent. So it just goes to re-ascertain our position on the importance of why this really special organization or agency needs to be established and ratified by our government. The AMA would be providing pharmacists and pharmacy students as well a more streamlined and aligned framework for medicine research, especially our African traditional medicines, especially in a time when we want to improve access of and safety of African traditional medicines, their development, their production, their distribution across the continent. And these are three key areas that we as IPSF have noticed that for us young pharmacists and pharmaceutical sciences, the establishment of this agency would help us. The first area is in education. In education, teaching becomes easier and relatable for us students because knowledge on regulatory science becomes more accessible with better resources and collaborations on teaching and learning across borders in Africa. And for international student organizations like IPSF, things become a lot more simplified because we run a lot of projects and guidelines for our members. And then if we have these streamlined areas of education for our members, for instance, if medicines regulation frameworks in Zimbabwe will probably be the same or similar to those that we have here in Ghana. It may be a lot more easy for international student organizations to be able to provide these projects and areas of learning for our members. It will bring regulatory science knowledge as well on a relatively higher level for our students. A lot of us graduate without having a lot of knowledge in regulation. And I think that impacts our practice as pharmacists. The second area is in the area of science. We realize that in harmonization of scientific processes to improve on our local drug production and distribution, pharmacists and pharmacy students especially can apply a lot of their scientific methods in the labs to improve livelihoods across the board through coordinated regional strategies with a common end goal. And we find that the establishment of AMA would help us to achieve this. So
Thank you.
in the area of science.
So can you wrap up, please, Lee?
Sure. So in the last area is in the area of pharmacy practice. And for pharmacy practice, we realize that there's the provision of regulatory boundaries for ethics of the profession to operate. We realize that by solving the issues of falsified and substandard medicines, of which Africa suffers over 40% of the global burden, we are getting the practitioners on the continent with solutions and tools to further improve on other issues such as prices of medicines. In August 2020, I'd like to add the African Regional Office of IPSF, we adopted and released a policy statement on falsified and substandard medicines. In there, we encourage the establishment of a regional regulatory focal point network to facilitate collection and compilation of regional data on substandard and falsified medicines and the sharing of best practices between national medicines regulatory authorities. Now, as young advocates for the complete abolition of substandard medicines and the harm it brings to many Africans and our economies, we wish to support the ratification of this agency by our governments. Thank you so much, Philip.
Thank you very much, Ni Ofulianan, for sharing your perspective. Dr. Ivan Jenga, as a passionate NCD advocate, what is your thoughts on the establishment of this organization? Why NCDs will benefit immensely from the harmonization, and how can AMA enable early access to innovation for one of the fastest growing disease burdens in Africa?
Then thank you, Philip, and good day to all, wherever you are. I'm really delighted to be joining all of you to see how we can enhance and strengthen AMA and actually get all the countries to sign the treaty. One, why do we need the medicine agency now? From the advocacy aspect of our civil society, what we do know that we have problems in regulating safe and efficacious medicines, not just for NCDs, but even for the communicable diseases. So how will AMA help us access innovation? It will enable institutional collaboration of scientific and regulatory resources that will help us improve efficacious and quality medicines. We can have, through AMA, we can have pooled investment in regulatory capacity and harmonize the regulation of medicines in the region. We will, this agency can also help us provide favorable regulatory environment for pharmaceutical research and development, for local production and trade across countries. Our friend Mary talked about availability of sickle cell diseases, and also this goes along all the other NCDs and even communicable diseases. If we can do this locally and do it across the countries in the continent, we will be better off. And I'm sure a medical agency that is resounding across the continent will definitely be able to help us launch and implement this. The agency will also most likely help to influence areas of research and development of new medicines and prioritize the medicines and help this reach patients through early access routes. We can have, through the agency, simplified access to information through standardized certification. We can also, and I know this will be very easy for an agency which is continental, have coordinated market surveillance, centralized information collection of and data sharing. Easy data sharing across Africa will help us improve our research capabilities as well. The partnership that we can have and consolidation of funding for affordability and access to medications goes beyond, I mean, anything that we can imagine of, and it will be favorable. They will also, in this era, we are all talking about universal health coverage. A medicine agency that is coordinated would definitely help us get monitor transparency towards universal health coverage. We will have potential for implementation of the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights with flexibility, which can help us afford access to NCD medicines. Please note that not all AU members countries have ratified the TRIPS. So this is we already know about the recent petition for equitable access to the COVID-19 vaccine. So I do believe that AMA will help us harmonize a continental-wide competent regulatory authority, will provide a centralized expertise to increase timely access to medicines and health technologies to the patients in Africa. A coordinated regulatory harmonization will go on to give us safe and efficacious medicines across Africa with scientific opinions and a common framework for all of us to work from. So Philip, I think that's in a nutshell. I know I have put a strong case for the medical medicines agency, and I would really want, and our NCD Alliance Kenya is very much in support for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Njenga, for your well thought through presentation. And already I've seen quite a number of comments and questions that have been put in the chats, and we'll be addressing them at due course during some part of this meeting. So recognizing your role in the fight against fakes, Oksana Pizek, lecturer, global engagement lead and founder of UCL Fight the Fakes. Can you share your perspective or the perspective of those fighting against falsified medicines? How can AMA improve patient safety as reflected in WHO patient safety plan, and AMA's role in post-marketing authorization and supply chain security?
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to all previous panelists who put forth a very compelling argument towards the value of AMA. As we know, the WHO has estimated that 1 in 10 medical products in low and middle income countries is substandard or falsified. And of course, in some regions, that number is far larger. And we have seen a surge during the COVID-19 pandemic that includes everything from PPE to testing, diagnostics, and even now vaccines. And the Fight the Fakes Alliance, which is working towards raising awareness on this highly neglected issue across the world, comprises of over 40 global partners, and some of them are on this panel as well, to support patients and people who are also victims of these crimes, and that disproportionately affect low and middle income countries. We know that the burden of substandard falsified medical products are within sub-Saharan Africa, one of the highest regions, and this is critical for all of the cross-border collaboration and the harmonization of regulations, as other panelists have alluded to, in terms of being able to protect patients from these low-quality products, particularly at a time of crisis where we see more of them arise. And only recently we have heard in the news about 3,000 doses of the COVID vaccine being identified in a Chinese factory, and 2,400 in South Africa via an international fake vaccine ring that the Interpol organization was able to bust up. So the importance of AMA is critical now more than ever, and ties into the WHO Patient Safety Plan directly through this concept that Dr. Tedros, WHO Director General, has been pushing in all of his term, which is the concept that there is no universal healthcare coverage without quality medicines. And again, the AMA will have a significant role in ensuring that there is a better and more harmonized response towards the identification, prevention, detection, and response strategies. And we've also heard from the Pharmaceutical Students Association Federation as well, highlighting the role that education and pharmacists play in preventing it, working with the goals of AMA and other organizations. So again, it will require international collaboration and transparent reporting in order to bring these this issue of fight the fakes towards a level that, again, is feeding into antimicrobial resistance and other problems that are all interrelated. You know, the previous panelists really highlighted the dangers of falsified antimicrobials, and that we all need to join forces. The lack of national regulatory and technical capacity has been one of the weak points around this, fueled with misinformation that also then leads to people outside of traditional marketplaces to be able to purchase medicines. This is why the post-market surveillance, as well as strengthening supply chains, is vital in protecting that quality, but also will reduce the amount of people that are going towards these gray markets. And supply chain security is another aspect that globally is more important now than ever via COVID, and AMA will be one of the most important aspects of. So I think that my final point would just be that you know, we need to join forces on this, and a call to action for all to fight the fakes.
Thank you so much, Oksana, for sharing your thoughts and your perspective, especially on the impact of AMA on falsified medicines in Africa. I think the issues around COVID, to a great extent, for many countries in Africa, has awakened governments to think about local production as much as possible, because as the initial part of lockdown, there were a lot of challenges with drug supplies and supply chain as a follow-up to supply chain disruptions. Mr. Emmanuel Mujuru, as board chair of the Federation of African Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, what are your thoughts? What do you think AMA will help boost local manufacturing and innovation capacity in Africa?
Thank you, Philip, for the introduction. If you may allow me to speak off camera. I represent the Federation of African Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, which is an association that represents African manufacturers. And our membership is drawn from regional manufacturing associations who are drawn from regional economic blocks, which are recognized by the AUC, the African Union Commission. Currently, our membership includes the East African region, represented by IFPMA, and the Southern region, which is represented by SAGMA, and the Western African region, which is represented by WAPMA. And our vision as FAPMA is to be a vibrant, self-sustaining pharmaceutical manufacturing industry in Africa by providing quality and affordable medicines so as to contribute to the reduction of disease burden and promote economic development of the continent. And our mission as FAPMA is to facilitate collaboration between regional pharmaceutical manufacturing associations to address the common challenges faced by the industry and enhance opportunities towards self-sufficiency. This will be achieved through advocacy and partnership with other stakeholders in promoting the production of quality, affordable medicines. Before I do my main talk, I would want to bring into perspective especially the participants, to the situation in Africa. Africa at the moment, especially sub-Saharan Africa, is importing 70% of its medicines, and only 30% is being produced locally. And it is out of that realization that the African Union Commission, the AU then, came up with the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa, which then led to the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa Business Plan, which is the implementation document for the PMPA. And IFPMA was part of that advisory board that was involved in the formulation of PMPA. And since then, IFPMA has adopted the business plan as part of its foundational strategy. I'm saying this because it is through the PMPA and the various initiatives that were undertaken under the PMPA implementation framework that led to the birth of AMA, or that advocated for the creation of AMA. The PMPA strategic business plan identified medicines regulatory and registration harmonization as being central to the promotion of pharmaceutical production in Africa. This came from the realization that most African countries did not have strong regulatory systems. Some of the national medicines regulatory authorities were poorly resourced or underfunded, threatening patient safety. Regulatory systems were not harmonized, requiring different applications for each national market. This caused delays in product registrations. Lengthy registration delays denied patients access to effective, affordable, and efficacious medicines. Some national markets were too small. Harmonization would result in larger markets, which created economies of scale. Africa currently has a population of 1.3 billion, or estimated at 1.3 billion, and with more than 52 countries. So we've got a number of small markets which make it difficult, especially where economies of scale or specialized manufacturing units are required to make specialized products. And regulatory barriers that are created by national medicine regulatory authorities make it extremely difficult and expensive for medicines to be traded across the countries. And this creates very high and very difficult non-tariff barriers for the movement of medicines within African countries. To address these challenges, AUDA, then NEPAD, African Union Development Agency, initiated the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization, AMRH, program to strengthen regulatory systems and promote registration harmonization in Africa. This resulted in regional harmonization programs in East Africa, Southern Africa, West Africa, and this led to, culminated in the birth of AMA. APMA has always been advocating for the formation of AMA and regional regulatory authorities for the following reasons. Creation of large markets, which will ensure economies of scale, resulting in competitive production costs. It will also remove non-tariff barriers in the movement of medicines between countries, which adds to the cost of medicines. It will result in an establishment of a strong regulatory system that protects the African patient from counterfeits and substandard medicines, which threatens their health and safety. It will also ensure that African patients have access to safe, effective, and affordable medicines. This also reduces registration costs, approval times, and delays, which are a major barrier to manufacturing products in Africa. AMA also boosts African pharma and manufacturing companies by the creation of a huge pharma market, as I mentioned, and creating economies of scale, resulting in gains in production costs. And it also reduces registration times, which we're currently facing. In other countries, it requires more than 24 months just to register one product. So that in itself, it creates momentous and huge barriers of entry if one wants to manufacture products in Africa. And it also creates a one-shop licensing of manufacturing facilities and also for registration of medicines as well.
Mr. Mojuru, can you wrap up, please?
I'm about to wrap up, sorry, thank you.
Great.
And it also results in the creation of manufacturing hubs that will supply regional and continental markets, and it will promote the growth of the pharma industry and also create strong regulatory systems and promote innovation and investment in new technology, such as vaccines and biopharmaceuticals and other specialized medicines like your anti-cancer drugs and so forth. And with that, I would like to thank the organizers, International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers, and also the host for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mujuru, for sharing your thoughts. And I can relate to many of the things that you mentioned. I've been privileged enough to travel across some of the countries within Africa, some very, very strong, small countries. And sometimes when you enter the country, there's virtually no regulatory capacity. And many of these countries are flooded with a number of falsified and substandard medicines because the companies with the good quality, affordable medicines find it very difficult to present dossiers and also to make these products accessible to patients. Just to go to the next speaker, I know we find ourselves in Africa where many times we have, among the challenges that we have, there are no therapies available for neglected tropical diseases. Dr. Yao Asari Abwaji, as head of regional clinical operations at the Drugs for Neglected Tropical Diseases, can you share your perspectives on product development partnerships and AMA's role in fostering research and innovation and how the continent of Africa can benefit from your organization? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have also invited Dr. Benoit, who is the head of regulatory affairs for drugs for neglected diseases, and she's in the audience. So if we have any regulatory questions, I'm sure she'll be happy to address them. Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative is a small not-for-profit research organization developing treatments for the most neglected patients. These new treatments are usually the neglected tropical diseases or NTDs that are endemic in our regions, and big pharma companies do not see any profits from developing such drugs. An African Medicines Agency will greatly enhance the speed with which these medicines can get to the patients. DNDi currently runs many trials in Africa, in Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, Uganda, the DRC, Benin, Guinea, Ghana, to just name a few. These are all multi-site studies in Africa that need approval by health authorities and ethics committees in these countries. However, the lack of harmonized requirements, coupled with lack of resources, makes the time to approve the start of these studies long and burdensome, and that it increases the time for drug development, which by itself is a very long process that doesn't need any added delays. Organizations such as DNDi cannot afford to have as many requirements as we currently have in Africa. There are about 56 different health authority requirements. All the efforts that have already been done could now be centralized at the AMA level, which could be the platform to share expertise, do the review of dossiers together, not reinvent the wheels, but bring specific local expertise to ensure not only the quality of the products, but also the products are targeted for the needed population. Taking into consideration conditions in the countries, like the shelf life of the product, storing conditions, etc. Harmonization efforts at the national and regional levels could be centralized at the AMA levels, at the AMA level. Other areas where an African Medicines Agency will be of great help include publishing areas of unmet needs for new medicines that potential research organizations can focus on for their development pipelines, similar to what the European Medicines Agency does for Big Pharma. This will be of tremendous help to companies that genuinely want to do drug development in Africa. It could also work on a harmonized approach for approval authority authorization of medicines in Africa. This ensures there are clear guidelines for pharmaceutical companies to follow from preclinical to regulatory approval. It can also provide a forum for research organizations to discuss scientific, legal, and regulatory aspects of their medicines, as the EMA currently offers to pharma companies. As the African Medicines Agency takes over the work of regulatory approval, the regulatory agencies, which are usually constrained by scarce resources, can then focus these scarce resources on conduct of clinical trials in their countries and fighting unsafe and unregulated drugs on their markets. Also, they can ensure quick access to drug supply issues, distribution, maintenance, and ensure quality of the drug to reduce counterfeits, etc. The current pandemic and subsequent scramble for vaccines for the African continent is a sharp reminder of what could be in store for us if we continue to drag our feet on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yao Asare-Boaji, for sharing the perspective of the Drugs for Neglected Tropical Diseases Initiative, and in general about how AMA can impact drug development in Africa in general. I think we've heard quite extensively about the patient's perspective and how patients can benefit from AMA. We've also heard from an NCD advocate concerning how patients with NCDs in Africa can benefit immensely from the establishment of AMA. We've also had the opportunity to hear from our advocates in the fight against falsified medicines, which Africa, to a great extent, due to a number of reasons, which includes the absence of such a body, is a dumping ground for many of these products. We've also taken the perspective of Local Manufacturers Association on how an AMA organization can impact greatly many of African countries' quest to produce a number of products locally. And also we've had just quite the perspective of the Drug Development Agency. Dr. Margaret Agamanyete, as head of division of the Department of Health, Humanitarian Affairs, Social Development at the African Union Commission. I know your task this afternoon is big. May I kindly ask for you to share your response or your perspectives on all the presentations that have been made by all the stakeholders or experts for this meeting.
Good afternoon, our dear moderator, and thank you to all who have invited us this afternoon to share our perspectives on the African Medicines Agency. And indeed, huge thanks to panelists who have spoken before me and have shared their rich perspective and passion with regards to the soon to be established African Medicines Agency. I believe my colleague and friend Emmanuel, who spoke before me, provided some background details as to how the African Medicines Agency is coming to be established. Its treaty was endorsed by the heads of state and government in February last year. And in order for it to be established, the treaty must be ratified by a minimum number of 15 member states. As we speak today, we have at least 8 that have fully ratified and 18 that have signed the treaty. Now, signing the treaty means that they have expressed interest and aligned themselves with the content and intent of the treaty. And the ratification, which is a national process, means that national laws will be realigned to accommodate the intent and purpose of the treaty. Now, to move slightly forward, and having listened to many of the the very passionate intent that our panelists have for the African Medicines Agency. I'll just clarify a few things. First of all, the functions have been decided to a large extent within Article 6 of the treaty. So I encourage many of our listeners and readers to familiarize themselves with these functions. And the reason being is, while many of our panelists have spoken to what the intended functions of AMA will be, they have also, there's a lot of assumption and a bit of a stretch currently as to what AMA would actually be able to, would be doing. AMA is being established by a treaty of the African Union. And what this means is that our member states must then sign up to be part of the African Medicines Agency. And that's why the signing and ratification is important. And so if a member state does not sign up, it does not become a state party to the treaty. And I'm saying that this is extremely important because the perception that once AMA is birthed, it is for all member states of the continent is not immediately correct. And it will have severe implications for countries who don't sign up and where regulatory systems are weak and not insufficient to meet the needs of its people. AMA would also be governed by a Director General and a governing board, and the governing board will have rotatory membership amongst the AU-recognized RECs, the regional health bodies and authorities, and members and state parties, and so on and so forth. So to a large extent, this is where the influence on AMA is going to come from. AMA is also not going to, even for state parties that have signed up to the treaty and are state parties, AMA will not interfere with the sovereignty of the member states unless invited to do so. So as much as AMA would be our second health agency to the Africa CDC and will build on the existing African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Program spoken to by Emmanuel, and will intend to have some sort of continental harmonization approach, it would also be very respectful and defer to the sovereignty of individual member states. The issue raised around COVID and the realization that it brought, indeed, this is one of the reasons why we are pushing and scaling up for the establishment of AMA, and it's pretty much linked with what our colleagues from WHO said, fighting the fakes, is that during the COVID period, the realization of the numbers of fake products, not only medicines, but medical products, PPEs, etc., and others, testing, diagnosis, and so on and so forth, that have flooded the continent, especially given our weak barriers. One, the continent has received a lot of gifts, which have come in unregulated, and to a large extent, what doesn't meet regulatory standards in the West is often offered or passed on to the African continent. And this is one particular area that we see AMA as a continental agency would have a strong role in assisting with the regulation of such medicines, medical products, and technologies during such circumstance. There is issue of local manufacturing has been raised, and while there are functions of AMA which will be linked with local manufacturing, these functions will need to be strengthened, and it would be good, since there are already several countries which manufacture various degrees of medicines, medical products, and technologies. Some of, sadly, are manufactured on our continent but taken to Europe, and Africans do not have access to those products. And it will be an area that would be important for the attention of AMA. I was pleased when traditional medicine was raised, because yes, indeed, traditional focus on the regulation of traditional medicines, which is currently a highly unregulated area. Not only do we have traditional medicines from even outside of the continent coming into the continent, but our traditional medicines producers are not effectively and efficiently regulated in majority of our member states. Our colleague from Kenya importantly mentioned the AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area. And of course, it's reached to the 1.2 billion population of the continent. You can imagine that one of the most important products that moves across our borders are pharmaceuticals. And therefore, with opening up of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, the whole issue of pharmaceutical regulation becomes a front and center, particularly given that a vast majority of our population are faced with fake, falsified, and counterfeit medicines and medical products. Again, this goes back to the ratification of the treaty and the fact that if you don't ratify, you are not a state party. And so civil society has a major role in ensuring that its member states ratify this treaty. Because you can imagine if country A is not a state party, but country B next door is, these products can be either manufactured there or be brought in to the continent through that country, and still find its way to other countries. And again, I would like to place an emphasis on generics, because I think that the future of AMA is also going to be determined largely in the area of the regulation of generic drugs. The issue around TRIPS flexibility was mentioned. It's an important one. I will not belabor it. There are already discussions around it with regards to the COVID vaccine production on the continent, and what the TRIPS flexibilities are going to mean for Africa, given that there are hardly any countries, if none, and I hope those who know better can correct me, that actually are producing active pharmaceutical ingredients on the continent. So that's another major area, of course, that would be important for AMA. There were another of other areas that were referred to. I will not go to them in detail. I think if colleagues read the treaty and familiarize themselves with it, they will clearly know where to put the strength of their advocacy, bearing in mind that once AMA is established, the functions as laid out in the treaty would then have to be put into an operational business plan. So thank you once again, and I take the colleagues to the opportunity once again to thank all colleagues, and particularly and especially WHO, who is here with us and who has support, who has already said, have joined us with extremely strong advocacy for the establishment of AMA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gama, for sharing your thoughts and also for endorsing the numerous calls for the establishment of AMA. I'll just recap one statement that you made, which is very, very important, that civil society needs to work and get as many countries ratifying the treaty as much as possible, because it will inure to all countries that have ratified collective benefit. I've seen a number of chats, comments in the chats. The treaty, the AMA Treaty, has been shared in the chat. So for those of you who want to familiarize yourself with the details of the treaty, you can check the chat and you click on the link. Secondly, as well, we are going to have a closing session and an award session for the conference right after this. The link for the conference has also been shared, and right after this section, we'll all move into the awards ceremony. Next, I will be calling on Mr. Kawadip Semi, CEO of the International Alliance of Patient Organizations, to give us a call to join the AMA Treaty Alliance, which is critical as a follow-up to all the presentations and perspectives that have been shared. So Kawadip, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm so happy to be joining everybody in Nairobi. I was born up and brought up in Nairobi, graduated there, and lived there enormously before coming to London. So I'm speaking as a true African, the 44th tribe. I think AMA is absolutely the kind of thing we require in future, because it's that Kwame Nkrumah's vision of a truly African-owned Pan-African institution. We are now pursuing this business, as Dr. Agame has said. It's a whole of society, whole of government, and whole of patient movement effort to promote this. So I'm asking all of you who have joined us to join our African Medicines Agency Treaty Alliance. The Alliance is an informal working group that will be from all interested parties. And our main aim and objective is to help and guide and ensure that we have a patient-centric, people-centered African Medicines Agency in Africa that helps us to co-create that future we want. As you know, COVID-19 has reset our buttons or our social contracts, and we need this agency now. And I thank you all for joining us, and hope you can join us after this with the African Medicines Agency Treaty Alliance, which will be supporting the effort to get this treaty ratified. I'm sure we can get 15 African countries to agree on something and ratify this treaty. Please sign on. We are waiting. It's bad business that during pandemic you do not sign an important document. Please ratify it. The future generations are not going to excuse us. They'll be looking at this and saying, what the hell were they doing, procrastinating on their neighbors during a pandemic? In the middle of a pandemic, we are not ratifying the most important thing that could get out. It's like somebody in a well. You throw him a rope and he doesn't want to take that rope. That rope is here for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kawadip, for sharing your thoughts and also for rallying the call for as many countries as possible to sign on to the treaty. I like one of your comments and your allusion to Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who foresaw some of this vision whilst he was alive, and to say, please sign on to the treaty. Future generations in Africa, not just in Africa, but beyond Africa, because we have Africans in numerous places all over the world, and they'll be looking up to us to take the right decisions that will impact on the overall quality of life of Africans as much as possible. Before we wrap up this session and close, we're not doing so well with time. First of all, I've seen quite a number of comments and questions that have been put in the chat. I think because we don't have a lot of time, those questions will be addressed and then individually to direct questionnaires that put up the questions. Just before I close, I just want to use the opportunity to thank the organizers of this conference, the IFPMA sincerely for hosting this session, the expert panelists who have shared their thoughts and aspirations for the ratification of AMA Treaty, and especially that of Dr. Agama for endorsing that call. Largely, the world is looking up to us to take this very, very important decision that will impact on the collective health of Africans. And as commented in one of the charts, that unless every African is safe, no African is safe. And one medicine which is falsified can move from one country to the other easily. And before I wrap up and close and move into the award session, I would like to use the opportunity to quote a very popular African proverb that says that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far together, go together. Let's continue to work together. Let's continue rallying the call to bring as many countries to the point of ratifying, signing the treaty and ratifying the treaty as well, so that it can inure to the collective benefit of everyone. Just to announce once again, we are going to have a very special closing and award session. And please take time off your very busy schedule to join us as we take an opportunity to recognize leading African health leaders who have impacted the continent with their works and contributions through research. And I want to use the opportunity to recognize and acknowledge distinguished guests who have joined us from the northern part of Africa to the east, to the west, and also to the south. Thank you very much once again. And we'll move on to the award session.